Rolling on, it is a special finale edition of the Pat Richter Show right here on 100.5 ESPN, the ESPN app, and Wisconsin On Demand. Our guest lineup continues with two greats from the University of Wisconsin football team in the 1990s. And I have no idea, Pat, how the hell I'm going to keep control of this one. So I wish you the best of luck as we welcome in former Badger center Tarek Engler and the all-time leader in sacks in Wisconsin history, Tarek, Saleh. Fellas, we appreciate you being here to celebrate the great legacy of the legendary Pat Richter, from Madison East to the 9-time letter winner at the UW to the athletic director and all the in-betweens of Pat. And Tarek, I'm looking at you, man. What do you remember from maybe the first interaction you had with Pat Richter in the early 90s when you joined the Badgers football team?
We can't talk about that.
It's interesting because, in 1992 when I came in here, not only was, my head coach pretty intimidating, but then you look at the athletic director who hired Barry Alvarez, and you're thinking Clint Eastwood all day long. and I'm telling you, I mean, between the two of them, you knew who was in charge, one of the department and one of the football program, and you had to mind your P's and Q's. And, and it's not like I couldn't, Pat was not, it wasn't like he wasn't approachable. Absolutely. Because then, you go talk to him and you have a great conversation and so on. And he was always, he was always available, to the student athletes. And, we all appreciated that. And, we're all very fortunate, obviously, to what he did to that program.
So we had Dirty Harry and Don Corleone.
Let me tell you something about that story about the Clint Eastwood business. I was on a plane with my wife, and we were walking off, and someone taps me on the shoulder and says, "I know who you are." I said, "No, you don't." "Yes, you are." No, you don't. He said, "You're Clint Eastwood." I said, "No, I'm not, ma'am." And then just recently, somebody come up and said, Jack Palance.
Fantastic.
I said, no one-arm push-ups, I think was Jack did. But that's what happens when you break your nose, and a couple years later than Clint Eastwood.
Oh, no question. And then going back to, Pat, when you first came on board, what made you to take the job? I know you love the Badgers, but Donna Shalala just took over, if I remember correctly, and there was a little bit of chaos going on.
Well, I mean, this is 1989, if I'm not mistaken. And what are we in the red, $3 million or something like that? And then the departments in kind of shambles and all the programs as well.
It was actually reported $1.7 million, and then they said, "Well, wait a minute, we made a mistake. We're $700,000 short of that, so it's 2.4."
There you go.
And it was. We didn't have a timetable. I look back and we did some strategic planning work. A fellow, Oscar Meyer, I had worked with him, and he came out and took us through a process. He said, "What would you like to do 10 years out, I'd say 1990, now it's 2000. How many years would it take to get to certain objectives?" He said, "Well, we'd like to get to the Final Four, the NCAA tournament. We'd like to go to a bowl game, once a year, and we'd like to be fiscally responsible. We'd like to be gender equitable." A lot of those things came true, but we were talking earlier today about the people and really the changes that have taken place, and they're not unlike what's going on now. When you guys came in, you guys were the new breed. A lot of people they were proven that they couldn't take whatever the punishment, not punishment, but the commitment to be successful. And that's what you have to do. You can't spend 105 people all the time and trying to get them to do the things that you want them to do. You get the guys that really are responsible, and you guys are the ones that put that on your back. And that really, I can tell you honestly, from a standpoint of the guys that had been there previously in 1963, some of the guys that were there in 1960, I was a freshman, we weren't eligible. To this day, it was a bad game. It was really a bad game. They played Washington and Bob Slorette. And you ask them, saying, "Well, what time is it, Bill?" 44-8. They got beat 44-8. And so when they say, "What time is it?" 44-8. You still remember it. So it was. You guys took us off the hook.
Yeah, you had mentioned that, before we came on, and, really that 93 team, 94 Rose Bowl victory kind of took that monkey off, your squad's back, the 63 team. And we're just kind of laughing because Tarek and I are looking at each other, and we're going on our 30th year from that 93 squad here. And back then, Coach Alvarez and staff has been 3 decades. That's, that was obviously the objective, to win the Big Ten and go to the Rose Bowl. That from day one, as you know, Pat, when you hired Barry and he came in here, that was the number one goal. And now we're sitting here 30 years later, and to be able to be in your presence and honor you, because Tarek and I know, how much you meant to this university and the athletic department. The only all-time, 3-time letter winner in 3 different sports. I don't know how many different Hall of Fames you've been inducted to, but I know there's several. But more importantly, just the way you treated people, your staff, the student athletes, and just I remember one story in particular, and it was recently after I retired from the New York Giants, and I was back, and I was at a National W Club banquet, and Pat was there, and he was asking me how I was doing, and the transition and everything else, and I was obviously I had some anxiety and somewhat a little bit of embarrassment. I only had a cup of coffee in the league. I mean, I was fortunate to get fully vested, so 4 years with the Giants, and the first words out of Pat's mouth was, because I told him I was retiring, he says, "You're smart. That's the way to go. Focus on, a career where you're going to make some money and longevity." And he knows better than anyone, the National Football League and what that life's all about and how short-lived it is. And that meant a lot to me. He didn't know it back then, but that gave me a little bit, I don't know, just kind of inspiration, and go focus on a career that I'm going to have, make a living and have some longevity in, make Madison my home, and be involved with the university as I have and Tarek has over 2 decades now. Yeah,
and Pat, you taught us not only what it was like to be a great athlete, but how to live your life afterwards, after sports, because there's your life after sports is a lot longer, especially for Derek and I, than it is when you're playing, and whether it be Oscar Mayer or your work as the athletic director, but then your charitable work, and it's really important for us from the Easter Seals perspective.
Absolutely.
How involved you were with that, and then our NFL alumni chapter in Madison, caring for kids. Every year you put the all the Ben Gay on or whatever you got to do to get in there and play golf for us and be a great ambassador of all of us. You're the president of our fraternity.
Yeah, and then when he told me about that, that's a smart choice, Derek. The credibility, was already there. Before Pat became a very successful athletic director at a major university. I don't know, was it almost maybe 2 decades at Oscar Mayer and running a hell of a business, and having that resume even just gave me more, just kind of, this is a man. First of all, he's the godfather of Badger athletics, but he came from a private corporate business world and understood that, and used obviously a lot of that skill set to take us out of the red and get us heavily into the black, probably an $11 million swing or something like that, and the Kohl Center.
But you guys are, at a time when there were other things out there. It wasn't just playing ball. I started to think of, especially with you playing linebacker, and you playing a center in the middle of the line, Mike Webster and all those types of things that come up that are proven to be true, in terms of concussions and
That's a good point.
And things like that. They had to weigh those things. I mean, we played, we had a single bar mask, and we had a suspension helmet, which I think personally is maybe better than the helmet that you guys had on, which it was either filled with water or sand or whatever the heck it was a heavy helmet. And, this is really endangers the fabric of the game, but, you can't sit there and ignore that fact. I mean, the NFL did for many years, and so you've got not only you enjoy the times that you were there, but you got to think this back in your mind saying, what the hell, how does it affect me? And we don't know that.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because I think about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years later, 2005 or so, that's when I'm reading ESPN the magazine, and I'm reading all about this Boston University study and CTE and everything else, and of course we know where it's went from there. 18 years later, but that just conversation just meant a lot to me. I don't think I've ever told you that, but it really did coming from you, and yeah, absolutely. Tarek and I, we've always thought, had the utmost respect for you, and probably one of the more enjoyable trips was an alumni trip to Lincoln, Nebraska with you and Renee, and I got to sit at the same table. I don't know if you were for dinner with Pat and Renee, and I had a few, pops in me, and I told some old war stories, and I thanked the heavens, and I thanked Renee that she still liked me after the fact, because she said, I've heard all the Hack Barton stories and everything else. So we also had a good time together, for sure.
Yeah, and it was like yesterday that you started here at ESPN and having your own radio show, which I thought was awesome. I think we've been around a long time on this station as well.
Somebody said the longest
the guys were just
running show or something.
We were just talking about that with Craig Karmazin, which is a conversation you'll hear next if you're listening to it. And we think we determined Pat's been on maybe one more year or one less year than you guys. So you guys have been two ships passing in the night with each other as great ambassadors of the university and great hosts on this station. And you guys, the three of you guys, I mean, you bleed cardinal and white more than anybody else I've ever met. So it's a tremendous honor to be at this table.
Well, the fact that they are invested in the community is very important. I mean, that's you got a lot of choices, especially when you get a chance to maybe go to play ball someplace else and say, well, where do I want to be? And the fact that they want to be here and be supportive of the university, and nobody is a better ambassadors than you guys, and that's something that's you need that kind of continuity. But the charitable things, people look at those and they think, well, it's a lot of fun. You're going to play golf, dude. It's hard work. It's really hard work, and so the fact that you do that is really representative of the kind of people that are in the program to come to the University of Wisconsin, and you guys should be very proud of that. Yeah,
and Derek and I love our hometowns, but we love Madison and we love the university, and
there's
a big
lot
part because of leaders like you who've inspired us to be out here, and
you made,
we're grateful.
And I know you grew up here obviously, but Madison's always been your home. Our former coach Barry Alvarez always talked about the way of living, and how to use Madison as a recruiting tool. And you know what? He put his money where his mouth is, and he made Madison his home. Tarek and I did. And now, and Tarek, you can attest to this, how many former UW student athletes that you go on to their respective sports, maybe play professionally, are making Madison their home? They're more than I've ever seen today, which 100%. Is awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely, and again, I think to Pat's point, he's from Madison, right? He's the pride of Madison. He's high school, and he's been here his whole life. But you from Minnesota, Derek, and you from Connecticut, Tarek, right? You guys made it your home, and it seems like that is, we can go on the list of names of people either affiliated with our station or just that have settled down here, right? I mean, it's a credit to all three of you.
Well, that's the way that we viewed the opportunity to be the athletic director. Could have stayed with Oscar Mayer. Kraft Foods bought them, was purchased by Philip Morris, and then they part of their family. But you could see the jobs that we were doing were starting to move towards Chicago, where the corporate office was. Great jobs, but just didn't want to be there. And so that's when I made my decision to accept the job and opportunity what Donna presented. And so, that's the reason why we stayed here. And just exactly what you guys are saying at a different time and the events, but Madison's a pretty special place. Here we are today in the studio. I spent half my childhood across the street at Bree Stevens Field, and one of the great thrills of my life, the fact that at 10 years old we used to have a three-game series, best 2 out of 3 with the team on the west side versus east side. And you come to this stadium over here at Bree Stevens. I mean, it was a big deal. And those are the great memories we have of Madison.
Absolutely. Pat, I got to ask you a question I've never asked you in the 3 years doing the show with you. And that is, we've talked a lot about 1989 when Donna Shalala came to you and said, hey, would you be interested in this? And it seems like you've always had the mindset, anything you do, whether it's the radio show, whether it was as a player, high school, collegiately, or professionally, and as an athletic director, you never went into the mindset of, we'll see how this goes. It was always, I'm going to be pretty damn successful with this. Was that the mindset from the get-go? Because as we talked about, you were at a deficit financially. The programs weren't in a great space, and you came in and you flipped the total 180. Did you go in with the mindset of, I'm going to make this thing really freaking successful?
No. Well, I mean, to make it successful, that was the hope and everything. But in terms of, really there was no context in which to put it in. Saying, well, what is this all about? I mean, it's a different kind of business. I was in human resources, and it was a people business, so that I knew that very comfortable with that. But it used to depend on a lot of people, and after so many years of malaise, so to speak, there was just a lot of people were tired and worn out, and you just don't know what the response is going to be. I mean, remember one of the first games Barry had against California, and we were talking earlier about the senior poster, a whole new animal.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't win that game, and people send letters saying, well, it looks like the animals are just the same. Didn't win the games. And so it was just one step at a time, and that the success in football allowed us to move into basketball. Basketball was probably more improbable than football, because in football you had a context of some success. With basketball, you have to go back to when I was born in 1941, and so it allowed you to take the next steps, because you were able to have a little bit of a template, got out from underneath the debt, so to speak, and because of what these guys did, and then they continued that on. And so you had to be successful with the football, otherwise you wouldn't have an opportunity to go to the next step.
I think you burned the ships, so to speak. You had no choice but to be successful. This is your hometown, right? Derek and we could go back to. I'll go back to Connecticut. He'll hide up in Minneapolis if we could.
Well, that, and I mean, there was some, obviously, probably one of the most difficult decisions you ever had to make was to eliminate the baseball program, which you played that sport here.
It keeps your records intact.
And that was the motivation behind it all. We finally cracked the code.
But it was, being here, it's amazing in Madison, and that's one of the things that I think I treasure most, is the fact that we were able to do it in Madison, because a lot of the guys, I never forget, we were getting beat up in the press for something or other. I'm not sure what it was. The press was really kind of looking for negative things at the time. And somebody wrote in a letter to the editor saying, you guys got to leave Pat alone. He's an East Sider. He's one of us. and that's all. And in fact, my phone number is in the phone book. The phone book. That sounds like something. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
The number is in the phone book. And the whole time I was athletic director, I received one phone call at home, and that whole time, with all the things that went on. And it was after I had let Steve Yoder know that we were going to replace him at the end of the year. And you guys probably remember when we beat the Fab Five at the field house, just crushed him, and we were thinking, this can't be happening. And I had just told Steve that week, and it became public that he was going to be let go at the end of the season. So about 10:30 at night, the phone rings. Obviously, the guy's at a bar. Hey, what the hell's the matter with you? You got your head up where the sun doesn't shine. Says, this guy's a great coach. And hung up, and we lost every game after that.
What a story that is. Was your name in the phone book as Hugh or Pat?
P. Richter.
P. Richter. Okay, so he figured it out. It's a terrific story. Tarek, Derek, any last thoughts?
I got one. Were there any individuals or maybe other athletic directors that you leaned on in 89, 90 in particular when you first came in? Obviously spending, I don't know how many, 17, 18 years,
I'll tell you,
Oscar Mayer.
The fellow that I spent a little bit of time with, and he was kind of a legend, Don Canham from Michigan. It was an interesting proposition. Don never had contracts with his coaches. It was always just a handshake and what it was. He didn't pay very well, but he had been around a lot. He was a good friend of Frank Remington, who had been on the athletic board and NCAA committees, and he was one that Donna leaned on a little bit, and so I did as well. And but just a very short period of time, because then Jim Delaney had taken over the Big Ten, and it was kind of a new era, so to speak, when they turned to the corporate structure. It wasn't so much athletics and the athletic director and the chancellor together. It really was kind of like the chancellors and presidents are running the conference now, and that's when it changed. That's when Penn State came in, and it's continued to this day.
Well, Pat, all I can say is thank you for everything you've done for the university and being our mentor and a big part of our community. And we need to
Truly the Godfather.
Get you on the men so you get back out on the golf course with us and in our NFL alumni tournament.
I want to be there. It's just, we were around when that started because Oscar Mayer and Steve Lindblom with the Oscar or Louis Rich Turkey Company.
Yeah.
Kind of started that back years ago with Elroy and a bunch of the former players. But
we'll get you up there just shaking hands. That's all we need to do.
There you
get
go.
up there. I might be there right with you.
Tarek and I are great at that.
You're looking around the corner.
Fantastic. Tarek, Derek, thank you guys. We'll continue the walk down memory lane with Pat Richter right after this with Craig Karmazin, who joins us next. It is the finale of the Pat Richter Show right here on ESPN Madison.